Welcome back to Old School Eats. I'm Old School Derek Fournier, and on this video, we're going to be doing some work with pork belly. We're going to do it what some people call brisket style, which will be to be sliced. I'll go through how to season it, how to handle it on the pellet cooker. We're going to use our pellet cooker today, and we'll show you all the ins and outs of pork belly with regards to slicing. We'll be right back. All right, for pork belly, the first thing you need to do is get pork belly. Now, the place I typically get it is Costco, and I'm gonna assume a lot of you have access to a Costco, Sam's, or BJ's, or one of those big box stores. The pork belly I get there is typically very good. I think it's Smithfield, but it's very big, so I've gone through a different set of ways to do pork belly. Sometimes sliced, which is what we're gonna cover today, pork belly burnt ends, which will be another video, and then pulled pork belly as well. But this time I've actually got a wonderful piece of pork belly from the Naked Farmer. Not sponsored, obviously, just started this channel. But this is a friend of the family who has a wonderful company that provides, farm-raised meats. And so I've got this wonderful piece of pork belly that we're gonna season up. Now, when it comes to pork belly, it's a very fatty cut. So one of the tricks is you're gonna have to make sure you cook and render out as much of that fat as possible, depending on the bite that you're trying to get. I tend to season a little bit heavy on pork belly because there's so much fat. So I'm going to be using 3 different rubs today. The rubs that I will use are going to be somewhat predictably Cosmo Q rubs. I start with their Honey Killer Bee. Then I go with the Hot Dirty Bird and Dirty Bird in layers. I want layers of flavor on that pork belly. And the plan is we're going to season that up. We're going to get it out on our pellet cooker, which we'll go over in a little while. We're going to cook that all the way to about 195 to 198. And I'll explain a little bit later about why I take it to that temperature versus going higher. But this is going to be a pretty simple video because we don't do much with regards to trimming pork belly. All right, so I have my pork belly here. I've got some B-roll that should be going here to show you a good view of this pork belly. If you've not worked with pork belly before, you got a big fatty side and then you've got the meaty side. And when you're looking for pork belly, you want to get a nice profile that's got a fair amount of meat on there. This is also where bacon comes from, which you all probably know that. And while I love the Naked Farmer, you can see a little bit of that fat got scalped. But that's okay, it's no big deal. So what we're gonna do is basically just season this up. You may recall if you saw one of my other videos, I tell you to watch your seasonings because most of them have salt. In this case, they do. So I'm not doing any salt layer. But I do like, because there's so much fat in this cut, I like to get a lot of seasoning on here because it's gonna be on there for a good long time as well. And I think that the combination of sweet and spicy is very, very good for pork. This is actually a similar combination to what I use when I do my ribs, which we'll do in another video. So basic stuff here, just seasoning up the pork belly. This is the Killer Honey Bee. And everyone, all the different famous, I guess is the right word, producers have their own rubs now, and they've all sort of got the same set. They've got a sweetie one, a hot one, a traditional barbecue one. I mentioned before I like Cosmos. They don't have any MSG, which makes it easier for me in the household. But you can obviously use whatever seasonings you like. The Dirty Bird and the Hot Dirty Bird are the ones that they typically use somewhat predictably, based on the name, for chicken, but also for pork. And I find the two to be a great mix. The hot is not too hot, but it gives enough of a bite that your tongue can pick it up. So we're just getting some decent seasoning cover on this whole belly. That was the Hot Dirty Bird, and then this is the actual Dirty Bird that we'll put on last. And then we're gonna be putting this on the pellet cooker, and when we get outside, I'll go over a little bit of details on the pellet cooker. We're using the Myron Mixon Bark 2400 pellet cooker. I've got a combination of hickory and cherry pellets in the hopper. My plan is to cook this belly on a rack until it reaches an internal temperature just shy of 200 degrees, but we'll be monitoring it throughout the cook. The other thing that you could do with this, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we're out in the cook space, because I'm gonna slice it, I want it to be that temperature. If I wanted to pull it, and you're maybe thinking to yourself, why the hell would you pull pork belly? Well, because it's delicious. If you take it higher, up to like 205, 208, you wrap that last like 20 degrees or so, You can squeeze more of that fat out so it's not quite as fatty. And then you can pull that and it's an incredibly good pulled pork. Now you wouldn't want to eat it all the time. I've oftentimes thought about blending it with normal pulled pork, but I haven't. I will be having a video with a pulled pork sandwich 2A, which is pulled pork belly and sliced pork belly on a sandwich, which is a fantastic treat. But we've got this guy all seasoned up now. We'll get it out to the cooker and we'll get cooking. All right, we're out here in the outdoor kitchen. I've got my Bark 2400 Myron Mixon pellet cooker. I got this when I went to the last cook school, the same time I got the G20 gravity feed. I really, really like this cooker. I'm gonna go over some of the details about it. I do think I missed by a year because they ended up partnering with, I think, Smokin' Brothers, another American company who has a very interesting hopper design, which is below. Most pellet cookers I've had Green Mountain Grill and Traeger and a couple of others. It's the auger that sometimes causes a problem. Sometimes it's the length of the pellets, various issues. Generally speaking, they work really, really well. And this one particularly works very well. But I really love the new series too, so I'm a bit jealous of that. At any rate, I went with the 2400 for a couple of reasons, not the least of which being the size. As you can see, this is a massive pellet cooker. You can actually fit 2 full-size hotel pans in each rack, so you could have a total of 8 full-size pans in here. I've got a drip pan in here. It's a very small cook, so I'm gonna be just loading that pork belly up. As you see over here, we got our actual versus our targeted temperature. We've targeted 250. This thing does rock pretty solid. It's got 2 stacks on the back. You can't quite see them, but that keeps my temperatures very consistent from top to bottom. I'm gonna be putting this pork belly on down towards the bottom and letting it go. All right, here we are. We got our pork belly on its rack. I've got no camera assistance today, so I'm going a little bit double old school here by going with a handy cam. I'm gonna pull out this lower rack, get my pork belly, if I can squeeze my back finger underneath there. Just get it set right there on the rack, looking good. Squeeze back. As you can see, I've got a little drip tray in there. We're gonna let this guy just go. I'm gonna set a probe in it in a little while, but right now, he just needs to take that smoke and cook. And we'll check in about an hour and a half. This should be about, I'm gonna guess, a 4-hour cook, maybe 4.5 hours, but obviously, you guys all know this, don't go by time, go by temperature. We'll load the probe up, put that in there and monitor it remotely. All right, we're out at the Bark 2400, cooking along at 250 degrees. Been about 2 hours now. Take a look, see where our pork belly is at. So you got some pooling there in the top and that little gash we talked about earlier. See where our temperature is though. We're about 147 there. About 157 here on the front side. I may have just gone a little bit too deep there. We're about 160. Mid 150s, 160 across the board. I just got a bad reading, which is fine. It's making good progress. We're gonna put that back in there like I mentioned in the intro. We want this to get between 190 and 200. We're gonna let that continue cooking, and we'll be back. We're back out in the outdoor kitchen, and I want to show you guys something. I use a fair number of temperature probes. I mentioned this on a previous video, but I have noticed that temperature probes do go crazy from time to time. Now, this is the probe that came with the Mixon cooker. The cooker's at 250, doing great. The probe temperature says 220. Now, there's no way in hell that it's 220. Now, I've got it stuck in, as you can see, towards the end of the pork belly. So I just tried to reorient it lower, and it's still reading at 220. Now, this isn't a slight against the Mixon probe. I doubt that Mixon actually makes these probes. I've had this happen with ThermoWorks, a bunch of them. Now I've got my InstaRead, my ThermaPen, and you can see that we're at about 173 and climbing. 177 back there, which is what I really expected to be. The moral of this story is, when you're using these additional probes, double check. There's a reason why the good ones cost what they cost. Also, that cable is very thin, and sometimes you'll get an issue with that or the adapter. So I'll test that in boiling water, freezing water, and do all the things I need to do. But for right now, I'll just use my ThermoWorks Thermapen. We're up over 170, probably about another hour and change, and then we'll be ready to take this off and let it rest for a little while before we slice it up. All right, we're back in the kitchen from the outdoor kitchen. The pork belly came off. It probed, just so you know, the fat's gonna probe a little bit hotter. We had some 200s in some of the area, but down in the meat we got where we wanted to be. I'm gonna move this from the rack over to my cutting board. So you guys can see that. Color looks great. And we're gonna take some slices of this and see what we ended up with. Now, one of the things you gotta be cautious about with this is the meat side is on the bottom. And so you don't want that to get overcooked. So one thing I didn't video was I did move it up to the top rack for about the last 40 minutes to try and have that come out the way we wanted to. But here is our pork belly. Show it there. Show over the camera. You can see we got a really great render of the fat, all that fat cap on the top. Now there's another sort of river of fat that runs through the middle. We got a lot of render out of that too. We got two really great pieces of pork belly meat, and we'll give it a try. I'm telling you, if you've not done pork belly, you owe it to yourself to give this a try. It is fatty. The flavor from the seasonings came out really, really good. Not too heavy, which is nice. But the moisture is just insane. When you slice this up, you can throw it in a pan and fry it up for breakfast, almost like it's a bacon, but it's not cured. You can make sandwiches out of it, which was one of the things I mentioned. You can do sandwiches with a couple slices of this and then some pulled pork. And if you like coleslaw or pickles, it's a great combination. Or you can just heat it back up and enjoy it as a sliced delicacy. You don't need a whole lot of it because it is fatty, but it is fantastic. So thanks for watching this video. Remember, like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all those sorts of things. We're going to continue to do what we can do to bring interesting videos. Love to get your feedback. And we'll see what the next video is going to be about. Until next time.